I'm Al Ferguson, the lead anchor at Queer News Tonight. Welcome to a special Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable. This special broadcast supports the mission of Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network in our LGBTQ+ community. We are a nonprofit 501c3 media company in the same model of PBS and NPR, but designed for the LGBTQ+ community. Our mission is to support the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ+ community. We want to inform and educate the key issues of our Black community, Latino, lesbian, trans, seniors, HIV/AIDS healthcare, business, political advocacy, and faith. And today's Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable supports our 10th pillar, LGBTQ+ youth and students. Help us support our LGBTQ+ community. We are part of one of the largest LGBTQ+ media companies in America, Hotspots Magazine and Happening Out Television Network. Our magazine is celebrating 38 years of the LGBTQ+ experience, and our television news, talk, and entertainment shows support our mission to educate the LGBTQ+ and broader community. This is the world's first and only LGBTQ+ daily television news and talk that is broadcasting live and then available on demand. And we are available on all smart televisions, including Roku, Apple Television, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, YouTube, and Facebook. It's time to queer up the news. We are live and literally out of the closet and into the headlines. This is the Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable on Queer News Tonight.
This is the world's first live daily LGBTQ evening news show, literally out of the closet and into the headlines on Queer News Tonight with Al Ferguson.
Hello, 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 and welcome to the Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable. I'm Kai Carey, and I'm thrilled to be your host for this important event. I'm a board member of Safe Schools, and I'm also pursuing my doctoral degree in public health. Today, we'll discuss current and proposed state anti-queer laws and their impact on the trans community, queer students, and drag performers, focusing on Florida. We'll also be delving into how state universities are responding to government requests regarding trans students, exploring anti-drag legislation, discussing the importance of protecting the drag community from a mental health perspective, and emphasizing the importance of political participation within the queer community. We are truly honored to have a diverse and knowledgeable group of panelists joining us today. Each of them bring unique perspectives and insights which will undoubtedly contribute to a rich and engaging discussion. Let's take a moment to introduce each of our panelists, and as I call your name, please briefly introduce yourself, share your background, and let us know what you hope to contribute to today's discussion. First, we have Francesca De Amore, a Safe Schools board member and activist and entertainment director of My Hollywood Pride. Francesca?
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. I'm Francesca De Amore, and yes, I'm a proud board member of Safe Schools South Florida. I have a lot to say about the drag laws, being a former drag queen. Well, I guess you're always a drag queen when you're a drag queen. And I'm a trans woman, so these laws affect me personally. Also, as a FIU graduate, I have a lot to say about the DEIs in the schools as well.
Thank you so much, Francesca. Our next panelist is Sayer Valancourt, a queer and inspiring model. Sayer, could you please introduce yourself?
What's up with it, y'all? I'm from the Bay Area, Oakland, California. My favorite word is radical, and I identify as two-spirit, so I'll be hoping to bring that ancient traditional perspective on queerness of how I feel on today's society treating each other.
All right, radical. Next, let's welcome Olivia Bergeron Oaks, President of Spectrum at NSU College of Optometry. Olivia?
Hi, yeah, so I'm a student at Nova Southeastern College of Optometry. I have a background in psychology, but I'm pursuing my Doctor of Optometry degree right now. I am non-binary and queer and interested in bringing all of those together today to kind of contribute to the discussion however I can.
Awesome, thank you. Next, please welcome Vaughn Sellers, a trans student at Barry University.
Hi, I'm Vaughn. I'm a trans student at Barry University. I'm also vice president of the Pride organization at my school. And I'm here today to support the queer community, especially the trans community, and to speak out in support of everyone.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Harold Marrero, Chief Operating Officer of Safe Schools. Harold?
Hi, everybody. My name is Harold Marrero, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Safe Schools South Florida. And I'm also a pastor in Miami. And I'm hoping to bring in some perspectives on pluralism and how that is important for our communities, how it's important for our nation, and give a little bit of spiritual, a little spiritual kick to this conversation that we're having. So I'm happy to be here.
Looking forward to it. Let's also welcome Ashley Mayfair, Director of Operations at Trans Social. Ashley?
Hi, everybody. Ashley Mayfair. I use they and she pronouns. I'm a non-binary queer person and co-founder of Trans Social, which is a local trans-led nonprofit that provides a lot of direct services to the community. And I'm here to give some perspective on the needs of the community right now and how these bills are affecting them.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Later, Erin Bosloon will be joining us, Director of Youth Organizing at Men for Choice. I want to thank you all of our virtual and in-person guests for joining us here today. We are at the Happening Out Studios on the campus of Sunshine Cathedral. Whether students, drag queens, trans, lesbian, people of color, non-binary, everyone is welcome at the world's largest queer church, Sunshine Cathedral. Sunshine Cathedral is proud to join forces with Hotspots Happening Out to support safe schools and the vital mission they serve in our LGBTQ+ community. Watch this.
Hi, I'm Evan Almanzar, and I'm with Sunset Youth Leadership Council, and Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church.
We are eager to dive into our discussions and explore the important topics at hand. Let's begin by summarizing the current and proposed state anti-queer laws in Florida and how they affect the trans community, queer students, and drag performers. In recent years, we have seen an alarming increase in discriminatory legislation targeting these vulnerable communities. First, anti-trans bill includes Women's Sports and Gender-Affirming Healthcare. The proposed Fairness in Women's Sports Act, HB 1475, which bans transgender women and girls from participating in female sports teams in both high school and college settings. Additionally, HB 935 would have restricted access to gender-affirming healthcare for transgender minors. This legislation would have criminalized medical professionals who provide treatment like hormone therapy or puberty blockers to minors, making it difficult for trans youth to access essential healthcare services. Although HB 935 failed to become law, and HB 1475 was severely restricted to K-5 charter schools, the targeting nature of both bills towards the trans community is very concerning. Next, there's parental rights and Don't Say Gay. That law negatively impacts queer students in the Parental Rights in Education Bill, HB 241, also known as the Don't Say Gay Bill. This legislation prohibits discussions about sexual orientation and gender identity in K-3 classrooms and limits such discussions in higher grade levels. While there isn't specific legislation targeting drag performers, the anti-queer and anti-trans laws mentioned above create a hostile environment that may indirectly affect drag performers as well. Next, let's discuss how state universities are responding to state government requests to hand over the personal information of trans students. Institutions like FIU and other state universities are caught in a difficult position as they must balance protecting their students' privacy while complying with state requirements. In response to these requests, students and faculty from various universities have organized protests and started campaigns to resist these intrusive measures. They have also sought legal counsel and reached out to LGBTQ+ organizations for guidance on how to protect their students' rights. Next, anti-drag legislation coming out of the state governments across our nation is fundamentally anti-American and clashes with the American ethos of individual freedom and expression. These laws aim to suppress the vibrant and diverse drag culture that has played a crucial role in fostering understanding, acceptance, and dialogue around LGBTQ+ issues. The passage of such legislation not only infringes upon the rights of drag performers, but also sets a dangerous precedent for the suppression of other forms of self-expression. Protecting our trans siblings in the drag community is of utmost importance, particularly when considering the mental health effects that anti-trans laws have on children and young adults. Studies have shown that these discriminatory policies can lead to increased rates of depression, anxiety, and suicidality among trans and queer youth. By advocating for the rights of drag performers and promoting acceptance and understanding for our trans family, we can help mitigate these negative effects and create a more inclusive environment for everyone. Lastly, it's crucial for the queer community to engage in political participation. Voter registration and civic engagement are essential tools in advocating for LGBTQ+ rights and combating discriminatory legislation. We encourage everyone to register to vote, stay informed about local and national elections, and participate in political initiatives that support the LGBTQ+ community. By making our voices heard, we can push for positive change and hold our elected officials accountable for promoting inclusion and acceptance for all. In conclusion, the anti-queer laws in Florida and across the nation pose significant challenges to the trans community, queer students, and drag performers. However, by coming together and engaging in meaningful conversations, raising awareness, and taking political action, we can make a difference in the fight against discrimination. We encourage you to share your thoughts, experiences, and ideas throughout this Rainbow Roundtable as we work together to create a safer, more inclusive environment for everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and let's make our voices heard. Watch this.
Hello everyone, my name is Kaylee LaChapelle. My pronouns are they, he. I'm currently a sophomore majoring in international relations at Florida International University. As of this year, I am the president of the Pride Student Union, as well as the chair of the Advocacy Committee on campus. I am also a Stephen J. School of International and Public Affairs Student Government Association Senator. I also chair the Oversight Committee on our campus. The two main goals of this protest was awareness. We were in the middle of our campus. We were handing out infographics. The main goal was to educate as many people as possible that were passing through, that were listening in, that were curious what was going on. Well, we wanted to inform them of what HB 999 SB 266 was. And then the second goal, which ended up being, was to empower our students, empower the people that came to our protests. This action is step one of hundreds of steps that we have to take in the next year, 2, 3, 4, because this isn't stopping. 450 anti-LGBTQ legislation, it's not stopping. I even make this reference that these bills are hitting blue states that have not seen anti-LGBTQ legislation since the early 2000s. That is how big this anti-LGBTQ movement is, meaning that we have to, in tandem, make our movement even larger. What I saw too often is, I keep saying this, these legislations are not just targeting the LGBTQ community, it's targeting all marginalized communities. When you ban DEI and CRT, that's banning discussions, information, education for Indigenous, disabled populations, LGBTQ, the BIPOC community, immigrants, and literally every single marginalized community is being affected. So my first response was, I don't want an LGBTQ community response. I want a response from everyone. So that's how I see grassroots organizing. It embodies the true sentiments of intersectionality. So the first step was on campus, reaching out to all these orgs. The second step was reaching out to all the nonprofits that not only I, but the Pride Student Union have collaborated with in the last few years, getting their support. They're the ones that are directly in the community, working with the youth, working with our public sectors. So I wanted to get their input. And then the last step was contacting other universities, because on February 23rd, we had all 12 SUS colleges protesting. We've never seen that before. And something that I took a lot of inspiration from during, and why I think grassroots organizing is so important is a true coalition movement changes things. And what was I feeling the day of the protests? After 3 weeks of barely sleeping, so much stress, so much paranoia about what's happening, I realized I also, have to use these times to empower myself. Like I said, this movement's not stopping. DeSantis, the Florida state government, the entire anti-woke movement is not stopping. It is actually just escalating at full force. So we need to create longevity. We need to empower our student activists. We need to create these spaces that they can do this, because the real fight is when we get to testify at the Florida state government. The real fight also, let's never forget, the end of this year is the presidential primaries. This same fascist leader, Ron DeSantis, is running for president, and we have to protect our White House. No one can withstand another 4 years of a right-wing conservative in that office. So that's the big highlights I want to say is, like, the day of that protest, that was step one. That was just step one, and we need to encompass as many people as possible, center our BIPOC communities, our BIPOC queer communities, and create these spaces that people feel empowered enough to fight this extreme opposition facing us.
Welcome back to the Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable. In this segment, we will focus on the challenges faced by state universities in Florida as they deal with state government requests to hand over the personal information of trans students. We will also discuss the efforts of students and faculty from FIU to protest and resist these invasive demands. As we've seen, anti-queer laws have been on the rise in Florida, leading to increased scrutiny and targeting of the LGBTQ+ community. One particularly concerning development has been state government requests for personal information on transgender students enrolled in public universities. These requests have put universities in a precarious position, as they must navigate the delicate balance between complying with state requirements and protecting the privacy and well-being of their students. So, reverting to my panelists, how are state universities responding to these government requests? In many cases, universities are trying to find ways to protect their students' privacy while still adhering to the law. Some institutions have sought legal counsel to explore their options and ensure they are taking appropriate measures to safeguard their students' personal information. Others have reached out to LGBTQ+ organizations for guidance on how to navigate this complex situation. Meanwhile, students and faculty from FIU have taken matters into their own hands, organizing protests and launching campaigns to resist these intrusive requests. They are raising their voices to demand their university prioritize the safety and privacy of transgender students and refuse to comply with these invasive demands. Through social media campaigns, letter writing initiatives, and public demonstrations, these students and faculty members are working tirelessly to protect the rights of their transgender peers. I'm going to reintroduce Francesca and Harold, who were both in attendance at FIU during the Florida International Student Resistance or demonstration on the transgender issues.
That was a very intense day. I chose to get involved with this particular movement. I'm a former student of FIU, and by happenstance, my last year of my senior year, I started my transition. So I had to deal with a lot of interesting new discriminations. And this was 10 years ago, and at that time, there were no DEIs available. There were no protections for me as a student. So watching all these students going out there and voicing their voices and wanting to be heard and seen, for me was really an amazing day. You were there, Harold. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I had the privilege of being a part of something that really inspired me in a lot of ways. Seeing young people, really fight for their rights, fight for the rights of others, seeing them mobilize and activate the way that I did was very refreshing. I'm also a former FIU student, and I never thought that I would come back to that campus to actually be amongst queer youth that were really inspiring in what they did. I think one of the things that I really appreciated in what was going on was that they all know what they're talking about, and they're all fighting for the same thing. And it's not just a one issue fight. It really is an intersectional moment. And for those that don't know what intersectionality means, it's an issue that affects everybody, that affects multiple groups of people beyond them being gay, lesbian, transgender, queer. And these kids know that. And they were, and I say kids, they weren't kids, they were these young people, these young humans know that.
Yes.
And that was very inspiring to see. There were groups from all over the university. There were many student groups. There were other nonprofits there that were helping out. And that was great. We walked around the school. We went into the streets, which was sometimes a little dangerous, but it was great. And I had a dear friend of mine that she works at FIU, and a week before that protest, I was at their house having dinner, and she was just, very taken aback what was going on. She was telling me about what the university was demanding, what the university wanted to see all their emails, that there were other universities asking for private emails. And, she's like, I don't know what to do about this. Like, how do you respond to this when your job is on the line? So that I took her spirit, her concerns, her voice went with me as I was a part of this protest at FIU. And that was amazing.
This was a very thoughtful strategy on part of the state of Florida. Myself, I can't imagine somebody rifling through my records, but they were very smart about it. They didn't break any HIPAA laws, so they weren't looking for names. They were just looking for everything else but a name. And I felt violated, and I'm sure other students felt violated, and I'm very proud of FIU for standing their ground and saying, yeah, no, we're not going to comply, because there were other universities that just complied. How do you all feel about that? Imagine if somebody was going through your records, especially at school, your school records, getting your personal information.
I know I'm actually currently a student at FIU, and I completely echo the sentiments of both of you. I felt so proud, so empowered to see the FIU community come together and stand together in that way. Because while this moment, the bills are targeting the privacy of the trans community, it could be any other community moving forward. And we have to stand in solidarity at all times.
Um, I have no clue whether it affects like private universities yet, but like I don't think I would feel very comfortable with a state anybody like going through any of my private my private, anything. Like I that's just like like it's just not valid at all. Like I me as a young adult who goes to a college, I would want that to be private, something I don't want everybody to know. It's just very scary the world we live in today because what are they going to do with this information is like my thing. Like, what are you going to do with this? When you get this, when you got it, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to go forward and do something crazy? Or, that's my biggest issue.
Right. And transitioning is a very private matter. I'm a very out and open trans woman as an activist, but not everybody is that way. So to be targeted that way, not okay.
Yeah. Right.
Even without with the de-identification of the material, it's still, I wonder also, what is the point? What are they trying to do with this information, and how could they use it to target universities or target populations? And as you said, Kai, I also worry about what the next step is, because it's always a foot in the door kind of thing. It's always what population is going to be targeted next, and which one is the easiest one for them to go after, and then who are they going to keep going and saying, well, you did that last one, so you should be able to be okay with this one, and it just progresses from there, and that's really scary.
It's like an open witch hunt.
Yeah.
It's very scary.
Very, very scary. I do want to ask, do we have any questions from our virtual or in-person audiences about this? And going forward, as we continue to go through each segment, I want you all to be cognizant of that. Prepare yourselves on any questions that you may have. I also want to go ahead and ask Erin, who has now joined us. Do you have anything to contribute to this segment?
Yeah, I'm so sorry for being the worst and not being able to be there, but I snuck over during my lunch break, and I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm a former high school teacher, Safe School and supporting my students. And the main thing that I have to contribute here, I'm not an FIU student. It's some of the points that Vaughn made and others made, that this is where it starts. Where does it end? Right. And they have a strategy politically of going after whoever they think is most acceptable to go after. In the 1970s and 1980s, it was Anita Bryant who tried to fire gay teachers. And then that seemed a little bit like too crazy and a little bit too much like something that that extremists would do. And so there was a backlash to that. And then in the early 2000s, they went after gay people more generally and banning gay marriage. And now that's accepted. And now trans people are the punching bag. And, it starts there. Where does it end? What are they really up to? And why are they trying to make life as uncomfortable for people who face so many challenges already? What's their goal?
Are you afraid? How are you feeling about this? Like, what's the emotional response?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 34 years old now. I'm in a committed relationship. My partner and I are talking about starting a family, and it's a scary thing that I don't know what it would mean to raise a child in this environment. I mean, there's enough complications in terms of, in my situation, it'd be a gay male partnership. But I'm well aware when I see them going after trans people that it's not like our goal is to make life uncomfortable for trans people and then we're pretty comfortable with everything else in modern society. The goal is to make life uncomfortable for people who are different. And what does that mean for my ability to raise a family? What does that mean for people I care about? It's very, very scary. And it's having the effect it's meant to have, which is to frighten everyone who's different. And then the question, I think, is what do we do with that feeling? And do we take it, or do we push back the way the students at FIU have?
And I also think that when it comes to the administration, they're targeting teachers, they're targeting the administrative positions at these universities. They're bullying our educators. And if you were to refuse to give that data, what happens to your job? Is your job secure? Is there a way to get around it? It was so vague. And my friend, her whole thing is that she doesn't know what to do. She doesn't want to send this information because she's in a position that she does deal with, trans students and trans kids. And she feels that it, not only does it violate their privacy, but to then attach something that what if they go after my job? What if they go after my my status of being a teacher here? Where does it stop?
Yeah. So I'm going to extend this question to the entire panel. Why do you think Florida is doing this? Why is this happening here?
In a larger sense, listing for extortion and mass assimilation is nothing new to America's culture. And I mean, you got to start somewhere, but I feel as though targeting the youth is very, very sick because the youth are the future, and these are the people that are going to create change for the future. Targeting their education is what allows people to come up in a world full of more hate and more ignorance to be less friendly to your neighbors and separate yourself from other people.
Thank you.
I think also what is happening with all of these different bills and laws that are passing, it's creating an environment of normalizing anti-trans behavior and thought process. So it's really basically trying to extinguish what I think a lot of activists have worked so hard for so long. I thought we were at a space just a couple of years ago. I was so happy to see trans youth expressing themselves, being themselves. It would make me cry a lot of the time, but now I'm crying for a different reason. It's already difficult to feel isolated and different, especially in a school environment. And this also pertains to parents that are LGBTQ that have kids in schools as well. They're also being targeted heavily. So is this the biggest witch hunt of all? People are afraid now. People are very afraid of trans people. And this has just been building up, building up, building up. That's why it's important for all of us to speak out, speak our truth, and just say, no, we won't accept this behavior. This is 2023.
Sure.
So those are my thoughts.
And I guess piggybacking off of you, with the fear that they're utilizing, they're silencing the individuals who exist within the space, the individuals who support those within that space. And going back to what you said, Sayer, because they're targeting the educational institutions, we don't just go to academic institutions to get a piece of paper at the end of the day. A lot of people gain and develop and form their worldviews within those spaces, going from kindergarten straight to higher education. And so when you are preventing certain forms of thought from occurring on those campuses, then going forward into the future, you said it's 2023, what is that going to look like 1 to 2 decades from now if we're no longer allowed to have these discussions, these people are no longer allowed to exist within these spaces?
I feel like our queer community, whether you're trans, lesbian, gay, we make up those universities. So I feel like if they're trying to take us away, silence us, there will not be a population on a campus because we help to build, we give them money. It's like they want to be the foundation of something big, but I want to know, like, what's the foundation too? It has no, I feel like Florida, it's like they want to do something big to, like, because I know he's trying to, like, Ron DeSantis is trying to go for president. And it's like, once you do this, what is your goal now that you have access to, like, everywhere?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to thank all of my panelists for this important conversation. We must continue to work together to advocate for the rights and well-being of transgender students, not just in Florida, but across the entire nation. Please stay tuned for our next segment, where we will delve into the impact of anti-drag legislation on drag performers and the broader LGBTQ+ community. We look forward to continuing this important dialogue with you all. Watch this. Welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed the performance as much as I did. In this next segment, we will discuss the concerning rise of anti-drag legislation coming out of state governments and how these laws fundamentally clash with the American ethos. We are honored to have the COO of Safe Schools, who is also a pastor in Miami and an advocate for a pluralist society. Once again, Harold.
Thank you, Kai, for that introduction. And, I'm going to start off with a story. I came to this country when I was 7 years old. My parents put me in a little boat. We escaped Cuba, got picked up by a cruise ship, and we came into Miami a few days later. And one of the first things that shocked me was the diversity of people that was in the city. Miami is a very diverse city, and just beyond the food in the supermarkets that we didn't have in Cuba, beyond McDonald's, which I tried for the first time, which was great, beyond any of that, it was how diverse the city was. It wasn't just Cuban, it was people from all over Latin America, from Central America, from the Caribbean, from the United States, from up north, from Europe. And that really inspired me. It was something that I wasn't used to in Cuba, because in Cuba, even though in Cuba we have diversity, it's very much just Cubans. And going through school, I went through the school system here, to the public school system. I was always challenged by the people that I met to get beyond any preconceived notions that I had, to get to know their true selves, to get to know who they really were. And I had I was very intentional as I went through middle school and high school to always have friends that were different from me, to kind of get all the rebels and all of the people that didn't quite fit in, to get all the nonconformists, and that was my group of friends. And let me tell you, there was so much innovation in that diversity. There were so many things that we could talk about. There were, I learned about so many different movies, so many different animes that I wouldn't have learned before. And I think that diversity made me who I am today, and is what inspired me to really be into, to get into theology, to get into seminary. And in seminary, I took all that with me. So what's happening today with all these anti-drag legislations and these trans bills that we're seeing is fundamentally against what I believe is the ethos of this country. We had our, right now we have "In God We Trust." But before that, it was "E pluribus unum," which is Latin for "out of many, one." And that is what I truly believe in who we are. This country was founded, for all of its failures, for all of the mistakes that we've done, for all of the things that we have a lot to look back into history and really, look at ourselves and try not to ever do that again. This country has that ability to bring people together, to allow anyone from anywhere in the world to come here and make a name for themselves, to bring in the diversity and inject that diversity into the American spirit. And what's happening now is very much anti that. And you spoke earlier about what was happening, why Florida? Why is this happening here in Florida? And I think that, there has been said that this country is a great experiment. It's a great experiment that anyone can come here and be their authentic selves and truly try to change the system. And Florida is becoming the great experiment for a subculture that's trying to take all of that away from us. That's trying to be something that I truly believe that majority of America is not. And they're claiming to be the majority. And that I think is very much wrong.
Wow.
Well, I take this bill very personally. So my alter ego, my drag name, is Miss Finesse. And Miss Finesse was an integral part of me coming to terms with being a trans woman. As Miss Finesse, I was on PBS Check Please South Florida as a food critic, and I actually won Best Food Critic in their 10-year anniversary, so I'm really proud of that. I've been on red carpets interviewing A-list celebrities at film festivals, and I was celebrated. I was accepted. How would it be now? How would the climate be now? And, these bills, they bring it back to the binary. What were you at birth? So for me, it was male, right, at birth. But how I present myself now, if this bill passes, can I be arrested just for being myself as I am right now? What if I plan to sing? I've been working with my voice coach on creating a cabaret show. So now this could limit, where can I do that? You know, in the state of Florida. I think as far as what you were saying, Harold, about diversity in Florida, there is a lot of diversity in Florida. And I feel as if Florida is being created to be a model state for the future. And that worries me a lot. Because from the outside, probably to a lot of Americans, this looks like a success state. But at what cause? At our cause. So I really worry about our drag performers. Not all drag performers identify as trans, but there are quite a few drag performers that identify as trans, and I can speak of that because that is part of my life. That is part of my journey as Miss Finesse. I worry about that.
I would like to share that for me and my relationship with drag is very symbiotic. It definitely has a core part of saving me in the sense that one, it gave me rhythm. That was the first thing, and as a light skin, that's a big theme. But after giving me rhythm and showing me this queer eternal universe where you can really love your alter ego, how do I say, besides my own personal story, I think it's very interesting to me that people forget drag is very fundamental within humans' history. For example, in World War II, they were in the trenches throwing on drag shows and performances to up the livelihood as to keep the morality rate while they were in the trenches during the war. And we've also had it within Shakespeare when women weren't allowed to perform within the scene or whatever. So I think it's very interesting that something that is so powerful and has so much education history to it, it's trying to be took away from us as if it's not its own professional field. And yeah.
No,
and also, what is the definition of drag? You know, there's so many non-binary queer youth. What is the definition of drag? This is just an everyday expression. People who don't subscribe to male or female binaries that have been placed on us by society.
Well, and gender itself is performative. We perform with our gender. We put on these clothes. We go out into the world projecting this one thing that we are. So these attacks on the drag community is really an attack on self-expression. It's an attack on people being allowed to be free in this country enough to express their authenticity, to express who they truly feel inside, and to give hope to other young people to also be themselves, to also express themselves fully, no matter what. It's not just a queer thing. It's not just a drag thing. It is an expression of who we are and being free to fully express ourselves. And that is very threatening to people that are not allowed to do that or that deny themselves that ability and want to impose that on everybody else.
Definitely. I also want to remind all of our virtual and in-person participants that we are accepting questions on the topic. And with that, I want to ask the panelists, why should students care about drag queens? Why should they support drag queens?
Oh no, please.
So I have a friend who actually does drag that goes to school in Barry. And I actually asked him, like, why is this like such an important thing? You know, and in his words, he said, without drag, I don't know where I would be. So it's like, this is their life. Like, this is what keeps them going. And I'm not mad at them. If this is what keeps you going and I'm all for it, do that. As long as they're not harming no one. They just want to live. They want to entertain. They want to make their coin. It's just a part of them that they can't let go. And if we strip them away of that, what are they left? Like, you know, it's that's why I feel like we should support them. Something they truly love.
There's something called like the Batman effect where you put on this costume and it allows you to distance yourself. And it gives you the space to kind of reorganize and look at things from a new perspective and kind of give yourself this separation. And I think that's a huge part of it, and why drag is so important for gender identity conversations is it gives the performers this space to kind of think about their own gender expression through this other lens, but it also gives all of the audience this opportunity to really try and grapple with what is gender expression and what is this gender performance, and so where do those boundaries lie, and it gives us like a starting point for these conversations. And so I think it's really important as students, as we're trying to educate ourselves, and as you said before, college is a place to kind of not just get a paper at the end, but to grow as an individual. And so these are places in which we can grow as individuals and good starting points for those conversations. And so as students, it's our duty to protect these spaces where we can do that.
For me in general, it hurts because I see as drag being a gateway bridge between the allies in us, as far as like drag is a place where everybody can come together and like, you know, see things you've never seen before, learn stuff you've never learned before. That's where it hurts in a general sense. And on a personal sense, I think it's also important to remember that queerness looks differently for Black and brown folks, in the sense that for what some people consider drag culture, something that we've been doing amongst our, how do I say, celebrations and ceremonies for generations around campfires. And so for me, drag is my way to present my ancestors and where I come from and celebrate my rhythm and my beat to the drums. So, you know, when people want to make anti-drag laws, they're also taking away a bit of my history and a bit of where I come from. Because again, it's not, I like to say that I celebrate in the art form of drag culture, but I'm not a drag queen. So to take that away, it affects what is ancient and what is also future for me.
Yeah. So I really want to pose this question. Why is it, do we think that DeSantis considers drag to be grooming? If anyone wants to comment on that.
I feel like, because I've always seen when they said that queerness in general is grooming, from my Black background, like in the Black community, we tend to ignore the pedophilia or anything that happens within like the family and things like that. But we see it as, oh, my child is going to be gay. That is an issue. They see it as we're trying to attack young students or young kids or young minds. We're trying to convey them into this sex symbol when that's all they see queerness as sex. And it's like, we do more than that. We're activists, we're teachers, we're politicians, we're everywhere. We're everything that we're inspiring. We're not trying to inspire anyone to be nothing dealing with sexual activity or anything like that. They see it as that. Why? I have no clue, but that's what it's always been associated with. But when it comes to real life issues, they don't care about it.
And I think they're utilizing lies, right, about the community that other people don't know because they haven't been in queer spaces. They don't know about our history. So they're just campaigning on lies to scare people, because you can either support drag queens and be a pedophile, or you can be with us, right? They don't give you more choices to learn about the queer community or anything. So I think it's just part of that campaign that they're doing. I can tell you that even just going out to dinner over the past few months with my family and my trans friends, the conversation at the table next to us, we overhear them talking about trans youth and drag queens. It is on the minds of everybody in Florida, and it's just being like pushed in the media so hard that people are full of the lies. They just don't know the truth about our community.
Just don't know the truth. So Erin, I'm going to pick on you. I was actually just coming to pick on you. Yeah, so what are your thoughts on drag?
Yeah, I guess 2 points to make. That, you know, in the 1930s, when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was seeing the rise of Hitler in Germany and Mussolini in Italy, he said, those overseas who are trying to restrict the rights of human beings in the name of social control, call it a new order. It's not new and it's not order. And I'm thinking about that a lot these days, because what they're doing is nothing new. right? They're claiming to be about protecting the kids and all of these things. They're not about that. And they're also on to nothing new, right? Like I said, Anita Bryant in the 1970s and 80s went on this crusade to try to fire, she called it the Protect the Children campaign, right? This is an ancient prejudice because they don't know what people who are different are. And so they fear it, which gets into the second point, which if you really think about it, it's extremely weird that they're so preoccupied with the sex lives of LGBT people, and that's the only prism they have to view us with. Like, it's really kind of creepy. And it's worth mentioning that, like, why is it that when you think of LGBT kids, you're thinking of sex? Like, doesn't that make you kind of weird? But that's the only way they have to do it. And because they're it's so unknown, and I think for a lot of them too, and it's worth mentioning this, there's a lot of internal confusion, right? Whenever you get these scandals and it's someone who claims to be the most moral, anti-LGBT, protect the children, those are the ones you end up with the scandals, and they get caught with a male prostitute or whatever. And so I think for a lot of them, they don't know how to control their own feelings. They haven't been able to live a life that's authentic, and so they're inherently afraid of what's different. And rather than process it in healthy ways like drag shows, which are about love and acceptance, they need to call that evil and dark, because for some of them, they see something in themselves that they've tried to shut down unsuccessfully, and so other people can't have the freedom that they can't.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, what can we actually do to support our drag community?
Tip, give them their coin when they perform it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Come up with the ones.
Come up with the 20s, baby. For
I feel
sure.
like, yeah, support. Like, there's a lot of drag shows, places, events that happen here in South Florida alone. I feel like go support. Like they said, give them the coin when they're walking around, flipping, twirling, splitting. Give them the money. Like, don't, the same way you would go to the strip club, act like it's a strip club. Give them your money. Support them, because they are trying to make a living just as you're trying to make a living. We got go. Support them. They're not doing it for their health. I mean, well, maybe they are, but like some, support. That's go, support, watch, give the coin.
And so much of what we said has been about this concept of the unknown, and they don't understand our community, and that's why they're afraid of it. And so the next step to helping them come to our side would be helping in that education, I think. And so I think speaking up when you hear these conversations and providing kind of this insight into the history and the benefits of this community, I think would be really important as well.
Yes.
I think it's important to support our drag community now and thereafter. I'm the entertainment director for My Hollywood Pride, and at any Prides, drag is a huge part of celebration. So what happens if this law passes? No more drag queens in Pride? I mean, that's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
So we'll cross that bridge if that happens. So it's important for us to stand up now, because drag queens are, being a drag queen myself, we're pretty fierce, and it takes a lot to be in the forefront as a drag queen. So we really need to support our drag queens however we can, as people. Not just as drag queens, as people.
And if you have friends and you hear them talk negatively about drag queens or talk negatively about all this nonsense, and you know them and you feel comfortable with them, and you know that they're just hearing, like Ashley said, a one-sided view of all of this, just invite them to a drag watch party. Put on RuPaul's Drag Race and just show them that this is not something scary. Me myself, when I first came out, I used to be very much almost afraid of drag queens, because like what Erin said, their authenticity, their ability to just be their authentic self for someone that was just coming out was threatening to me. And I threw myself at that world because I wanted to not be afraid, and I wanted to see what was being activated in me that I was responding to when I saw a drag show, when I saw drag queens. And my friends invited me to RuPaul's Drag Race parties, and that was something. And I went to drag shows, and that really changed my perspective.
All right.
And I'd like to say something that is not mentioned a lot in the community, but we have a lot of folks who are older trans women, like 50 plus, that have been performing drag most of their life as their main source of income. And so this would severely limit their ability to take care of themselves. There aren't retirement plans for drag queens, and there aren't a lot of affirming employers for older trans women or for the trans community in general. So I think that we need to be very aware that that's an especially vulnerable population that really wasn't even meant to survive, right? During the AIDS crisis, and people didn't expect to live into their 50s. And now we as a community really have a responsibility to make sure that they're taken care of.
100%.
Yep.
I want to thank all of my panelists for this segment, and also Harold for your inspiring words that opened us up and your unwavering commitment to creating a society that values and celebrates diversity in people so that they can live authentic and fulfilling lives. Your perspective as a leader for queer advocacy and as a pastor reminds us that the fight for justice and equality transcends boundaries, and our strength is tied to collective, creative, nonviolent resistance. To our audience, thank you for joining us in this important conversation. We will hope that you will carry the insights and inspiration from today's discussion into your own lives and communities, and that together we can work to create a world where all people are free to express themselves and live authentically. Please stay tuned. Please stay tuned for our next segment, where we will discuss the importance of protecting the drag community and our trans siblings from a psychological analysis and explore some of the mental health effects that these laws have on children and young adults. Now watch this.
Hello, Safe Schools Leadership Summit. My name is Joey Young. I'm a queer male singer-songwriter from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My pronouns are he, him. I had the honor of working alongside Safe Schools as one of the performers at the inaugural and most recent My Hollywood Pride in 2022 and 2023. I am so excited to get to speak to you all today, but specifically to the queer youth of South Florida. In a world where many of us have gotten to become ourselves in some of the most accepting times to be queer, many of you and fellow queer people in other states are being attacked by legislation targeting you, your families, your supporters, and your community for who you are. When I was 17, I was the first male cheerleader in 70 years at my high school, as well as the first openly queer homecoming king, winning in a wig, makeup, and women's fitted suit. I wore this as a political statement against the pushback I had received for simply being nominated on the court to begin with. My fellow classmates knew me for who I was, as many of your fellow classmates love and know you for who you are as well. They wanted to vote for somebody who represented their future. They wanted somebody to represent them, and I was that person. Nearly 4 years later, at age 21, as a queer musician, I am labeled as many different things. I, like many of you, fall under the category as someone who is labeled as gender nonconforming due to the way that they dress and carry themselves. Due to recent bills passed in places like Tennessee, someone who looks like me could be arrested for simply walking down the street due to the severity of the vagueness of these bills, as well as being in your home state of Florida. Due to bills like Don't Say Gay and Don't Say They, someone like me at 17 wouldn't be able to announce their identity the way that I was able to, let alone win homecoming king just as I did 4 short years ago. This is a direct attack at those of us who have found ourselves authentically from a younger age, as well as the generations of queer people and allies to the community who've helped build it from the ground up. It is important that I not only encourage you to continue to be yourself as authentically as you can be, but to also do it as safely as possible. If you are going out for a night with friends, make sure you go in groups. Share your location with them. Ask and make sure that the location you are going to is a queer-friendly space. Many will have pride-themed flags in the windows to signify allyship. Be aware of your surroundings. As common as it is to hear, it is always important to be perceptive about where you are at all times. But most importantly, speak with others about how you are feeling. Don't allow your fears for the state of the world to go unheard. Your fears, your feelings, and your experiences are all valid. The more you know on how things operate, the better you can do at managing how it makes you feel and how you react to it in your day-to-day life. Thank you so much to Safe Schools for having me. I'm so grateful that I got to share my little bit of insight and experience with you all. Have a great day.
Welcome back to our Rainbow Roundtable. I want to thank Joey Young for those inspiring words. And now, in this segment, we will focus on an often underappreciated aspect of our community, the drag community, and on how the current slate of anti-trans laws We are honored to have Olivia Bergeron Oak, President of Spectrum at Nova University, with expertise in LGBTQ mental health and well-being. Olivia is joining us today to discuss the importance of protecting the drag community and our trans siblings from a psychological standpoint, and to provide an overview of the mental health effects that these laws have on children and young adults.
Yeah, so I think just to start with, a couple of statistics that are kind of scary to me include that trans youth are more likely to experience discrimination and violence. Trans youth are 4 times more likely to experience a mental health condition of some sort, and are 9 times more likely to have attempted suicide in their lifetime than their heterosexual peers. We know for certain that having open policies in schools and having inclusive curriculum increase the mental health status of all students and decrease those suicide attempts, not only for our LGBTQ youth, but also for their classmates who are not in the community. So all of these laws that are coming out and across the country are really counterproductive to protecting our youth, despite what they claim. So these statistics are terrifying, and they kind of prove that this isn't really about protecting these children, and it's more about protecting the leaders who are proposing them and protecting them from their own fear. And so I think what's really important is providing spaces for these children to learn and to feel safe wherever we can. And the drag community is one of those places. And we have these, there's all of these places where, like in libraries, drag queens are reading stories to children. And these stories are often about inclusion and respect and representation. And it's important that this continues because it provides this space for everyone to learn and for children to see themselves in these people who are adults and expressing themselves how they choose to. But it's also important for those who don't see themselves in those people because they need to learn that that's okay. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot to talk about the mental health. And I'm sure everyone else has some stories they want to share as well.
Yeah, it is amazing to me that there are some folks in our nation that would rather sit in a library and polish their AR-15 rifle and show that to kids than have a drag queen read them a children's story. And they're still dressed in drag in all of their, whatever conservative propaganda they want to put on, their whatever military gear they want to put on. That to me is drag, and they're doing the same exact thing, except they're utilizing a weapon of violence, and drag queens are just reading them kids' story.
Yeah, like I'm a young girl, I'm 20, and I'm going through school like as a trans female. And we are given the opportunity to undergo hormone therapy. So with that comes us having to go through puberty all over again. And I feel like we're being denied our creativity, we're being stripped of our voices. And it's like that's not teaching like young adults to like be happy or to have growth. We're telling them to live under somebody else's standards, to stay in a box, not to grow. And it's like, I go to a Catholic school, and so like I sometimes a lot get looked at weird. Just recently I was told that I shouldn't feel like alone in a sense because I was given a private room. And in such a sense, like it's like with these such laws happening, do we really care for these kids? Because I have to go to counseling because to feel less disencouraged, to not want to end it all because the world is just coming to something in such a bad place. What about these other young adults? Do y'all really care about them? You're stripping them of something you're who they really want to be. And me personally, I wouldn't want to live in a world where I'm not accepted. So it's like, do they really care? They don't care for real. They don't.
And as far as the mental health aspect, through my own experience, I always knew I was trans, but I lived in a time where you couldn't express it. And going back to that is really scary for me. I believe our kids need to express themselves. There are so many national organizations that say, gender affirming care for young people works. So how could that all be twisted in the state of Florida to miseducate people. And mental health is a big part of, I think, everybody's life, but more so when you're trans, because you're swimming against the grain of binaries and what's defined as male and female. So I think you push a lot of people's buttons as it pertains to their own sense and their own identity. So I feel like a lot of people feel threatened by that, and that's not our issue. So it's important to keep on getting mental health, continuing with hormones, if you're able to. It scares me some of these bills are saying that kids that are on hormones already won't be allowed to be on hormones past the end of this year. That's crazy. These kids, their brains have formed already. They're moving on to the progression. They're happy. They're not thinking about suicide. They're not thinking about what's wrong with me. So all these bills are gonna these kids are gonna have like those cartoon bubbles. What's wrong with me? Do I deserve to be alive? Why am I here? Why does everybody hate me? And that turns into self-loathing. So trans kids are going to hate themselves as much as society says they should. This is a really scary epidemic with our trans youth.
Yeah, I think to villainize a child for any aspect of their identity is just such a horrendous thing for an adult to do. And I'm so grateful that there are supportive parents that do support their children in a transition. And part of, or at least one of the issues that our organization faces is just helping people access mental health care, and not just, which therapist your insurance covers, but which therapist is not a conversion therapist and as actually a gender affirming therapist. There's such a small amount that we feel comfortable recommending that it's really hard. And then the good providers are also fleeing states like Florida that are starting to criminalize medical care that is, like you said, Francesca, it's proven to help trans youth and trans adults to be able to access transition, and they don't want to allow doctors to do their job.
So like to piggyback off Ashley, I went to therapy on campus, and they recommended me a psychiatrist. And when I was talking to the psychiatrist, like within the first day, she didn't even know what a trans student was. So like the first day, she told me I had bipolar disorder. She prescribed me 2 medications, not one.
Wow.
And was like, "Oh, you got to take this." And I started crying. She's like, "Why are you crying?" And I'm like, "I have bipolar disorder. You just told me I have bipolar disorder." So I'm telling my coach and stuff like that. And my coach is like, "Yeah, I think you're crazy, but I don't think you're bipolar." So I'm like, "Okay." And so my best friend, who's like graduated as a nursing major, she said, "If you take that medicine, you're gonna become a zombie." So come to find out, when I get gender affirming counseling at UM, I don't have bipolar disorder. It was just my estrogen. The injection was just altering my emotions very drastically, and that was the cause of sudden commotion and depression and stuff like that. So it's like, they don't have enough gender affirming care, like people to actually counsel us for.
Right.
Aaron, I think Aaron wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I was going to say, listening to everyone reminds me of when I was in my second year as a teacher, and high school teacher in Miami-Dade County Public Schools, and I'd been asked by some students to start a student-led gay straight alliance. I'd only been out about a year at that point, really didn't know how to sponsor a gay straight alliance, didn't want to touch that hot potato. They were asking me, and these students had asked year after year, and this is the 3rd year in a row they were asking. So I didn't want to be another teacher who said no. We agreed to get the group going, and we had the planning meeting. I was big on it being student-led. Those 3 students planned the first meeting, and we'd mapped out that 10 to 12 students would come to the first meeting. And at the first meeting, we had 56 students and 9 teachers show up. And we were just blown away. And the thing I most remember, and it keeps echoing in my head listening to everyone, is how many students that day said, "I thought I was the only one." And in some cases, that was because they thought they were LGBT. In some cases, they had a brother, a sister, a friend. There was a boyfriend-girlfriend couple who came because they were like, "We're upset at the amount of anti-LGBT bullying we see, and we don't think that's okay, and we want a space to talk about those things." And then we had a future called a spotlight, where students could literally, just someone would get it once per meeting, and they would get the floor to talk about who they were, why they were there. The shortest one ever was 2 minutes. The longest one ever was 57 minutes, but you had the floor. And there was a student one time, I'll call him Bernard, who wanted the spotlight, and he had been having some difficulties. And so I was like, oh my God, Bernard, this is early on when I'm still figuring out how to run a Gay Straight Alliance. I was like, Bernard's going to have like a coming out story or something that explains the other difficulties. And Bernard goes to the friend room and just starts talking about how he came here from Haiti when he was 8 years old and he hadn't seen his mom. And he's talking about missing his mom. And I'm waiting for like the LGBT part, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. And he gets to the end of the story, and it was all just about feeling alone and missing his mom. And a couple of the kids went up and hugged him. And in that moment, I realized this is so much bigger. This is the space that the straight Haitian student is now coming to talk about his feelings of adjusting to the United States, and everyone seeing how those feelings of isolation are linked. And the opposite of that, the feeling of being alone, a feeling like you're the only one, how damaging that is. And that's what these laws are creating. They want people to feel like they're the only one. I've heard, I believe this is still true, at least at the time, that just the presence of a Gay Straight Alliance in a school dropped rates of suicidal ideation by 20%, whether or not you participated, right? And they don't want that. They want kids to be more at risk. They want kids to feel more alone, and it's terrible.
Thank you. A question that I have for all panelists. Are you worried about LGBTQ child suicide?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, speaking personally, moved to Florida 3 years ago during the George Floyd era and coronavirus. So going to cosmetology school and then protesting for a year, and then immersing myself in the LGBTQ community of South Florida and everything. After 3 years, I'm tired. I'm ready to go. I'm going back home for my own mental health. I feel like I've been fighting a tsunami down here. I give 110% of my energy at protests. I involve myself as much as I can. I am a leader outside in public amongst my youth and my peers. But for my own sake and my own future and the own children and family I want to have, I have to leave Florida, because me, myself, as youth, I'm tinkering out of it. Yeah. So for my own sake, yes.
I think that's exhausting.
And that's it's unfortunate that Florida has created that space for you to feel that way, because we're losing, not only are we losing your amazing authenticity, but we're losing the creativity that you could be, injecting into who we are as a state and who we are as a people here in Miami and South Florida. And, I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. If I may say, also sharing, it also affects coming from the Bay Area, which has I really love the LGBTQ community I come from, everything. I want to say that I feel that it affects the youth and the peers of how we treat each other down here, with all this sense of isolation and competitiveness and just isolation. It doesn't make people come together as family. It doesn't make us want to be together as a community. It makes us see each other as other and treat each other as other. And when in the nightlife, which is a scene of which we can thrive in, because those bars are our safe zones, it's not familiarity of family. It's, oh, I see you. Yeah, we come from the same category, but you're not my family. And it's very strange to be in this state and me seeking community, me seeking family and loved ones from people who are brown and queer that look like me, and for them to treat me other because of how they feel in this state is very, very interesting. So that's my own experience.
And something that's really hard about these policies is it does create this unsafe space for all of us. And it's so hard to be so open all the time and to bring people in and to create communities, because we all feel like at any moment it could all turn very bad. And I know that this othering and ostracization is something that I've been thinking about a lot, because I know that, I mean, I grew up in Florida. I've been here my whole life. And I never really had spaces to talk about any of this stuff. So I have felt other for my whole life. And I didn't know why, because we didn't have these discussions and we didn't have any of these spaces to learn about these things. And that's only going to get worse with these policies. And so it's terrifying to think of that either we're going to lose these people who are a part of our community and who could be voices for our community and who can just better the state because they are people who are amazing. We're going to lose them either because they're going to leave because they feel so unsafe, or we're going to lose them because they can't live anymore. And they feel they have to take their life in order to survive, which doesn't make sense, but it's the only way that the only path that they find that they have. And it's all due to this othering and this isolation that comes from this fear that has been created in this environment.
One of my courses of study at FIU, I got a specialized certificate in exile studies. FIU is one of the only universities in the world that actually offers this focused study. And I studied about other people being othered, and I was so excited that the queer community was overstepping, being caravanned out of our own state. But it's happening, and Sayer is an example of that. So the question is, how do we change the script? Not just everybody at this round table, how do allies, all other LGBTQ plus people across the state of Florida, the separation of the L, the G, the B, the T, that has to end now for all of us to group together and move forward. We can change this. We can. It's been proven in history. But we need to find a sustainable solution, because obviously other solutions have not been sustainable. And I think a lot of people just got too comfortable with the rights that we were given. And I think we have to demand full rite of passage, the same rights everybody else has. But we have to band together as a community, because if not, I could use a swear word, but I won't.
And I think, we survey our clients that come in, and 70% of our trans clients report that they have experienced some kind of violence, whether it's psychological or physical, due to their gender identity. And if you spread that out to the 50,000 or so trans people that just live in South Florida, that's tens of thousands of people that are carrying so much stored trauma and don't have the mental health access to deal with it. And I think it does lead to a lot of conflict, like big and small, within the LGBTQ community, even within the trans community. And we don't have a whole lot of skilled facilitators in conflict resolution here, right? So something allies can also do is help bring those skills into the community so that we can dig deeper and organize better and learn how to move through some of the conflict. There's a tremendous amount of racism within the LGBTQ community down here that's just undealt with, and we need to face it if we're gonna be strong enough together.
Agreed.
I think just like the pressure of constantly seeing these conversations taking place in the news, taking place in our spaces, it really creates this negative feedback loop that you're not safe anywhere. And that's just not right when there's so many other issues that we should be facing as a nation, as the world. I mean, our planet is falling apart. We have the violence that is not being spoken about. And yet here we are talking about drag queens and trans students who make up a very small portion of the population. Why are you putting a stumbling block in front of these people, in front of like children? And that, from a spiritual perspective, the one of the few things that Jesus had an issue with as a Christian was putting stumbling blocks in front of children. That is not right. And these people that claim to follow Jesus, follow a certain kind of faith, they're doing exactly what they were told not to do.
Thank you so much. I want to thank all my panelists. Thank you, Olivia, for your thought-provoking and informative presentation. Your expertise in LGBTQ mental health provides valuable context for understanding the challenges faced by our community and highlights the importance of supporting and protecting all expressions of gender and creativity among our queer siblings. As we move forward, let's keep these insights in mind and continue working together to promote a more inclusive, accepting, and just society for all. Please stay tuned for our next segment, where we will discuss the importance of political participation within the queer community and the crucial role that civic engagement plays in promoting and protecting our rights. We look forward to continuing this vital dialogue with you all. Now, please watch this.
We are the cast of RuPaul's Drag Race Live,
and we have had it
officially.
It's insane to me that people are really trying to block people from being who they are and who they want to be. This is the land of the free, and it does not feel like that at all.
The legislation being passed in Tennessee and around the country
is another distraction from the real issues. But drag is not a crime.
If we've learned anything from history,
the infringement of freedom that these bills are perpetrating
may only be the beginning.
So allies, we are looking to you.
The time has come to speak up.
Because if we let them get away with this, who knows what's next?
We need your voices to amplify our message.
So what can we do?
Register to vote.
Getting these clowns out of office is the best way to ensure our safety.
The process is easy.
Visit vote.gov and show up and vote.
If you are in an area that is not affected by the current legislation,
volunteer for the campaigns of politicians
who are running for office in more vulnerable areas.
Call your representative and express your concerns.
Remember, they work for you.
Donate if you can
to charities that are actively supporting our community.
And to the politicians who will protect the safety of trans and queer people.
We encourage people to support the ACLU Drag Defense Fund.
The website is aclu.org/drag defense.
To our trans and drag families in places that are affected by these bills,
we see you,
we stand with you,
and we will not stop fighting for you.
Welcome back. I'd like to thank everyone in the video that you just viewed for that fantastic and uplifting message on the importance of embracing our authentic selves. In this segment, we will delve into the importance of political participation by the queer community and discuss the vital role that voter registration and civic engagement play in promoting and protecting our rights. We are delighted to have the Director of Youth Organizing for Men for Choice, Erin Boslun, and queer who is also currently sitting on our panel. So today, they will be discussing LGBTQ rights, and their expertise in civic engagement will have us all engaged. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. And once again, I'm sorry I can't be there. I have a thing that I can't get out of, but at least I'm able to be here with you in this way. I'm going to do my best to stay on topic, but I'm a little distracted because I'm still a little salty that Aquaria won season 10 and not Miss Eureka O'Hara. But it was good to see the queens there stepping up. I want to start with a story about where I think in a lot of ways my interest in politics and the bigger picture comes from. And it goes back to when I was in Miss Tenney's English class in 7th grade. It was 2002. And I still remember sitting in the third row. I was living in a very small town, less than 1,000 people, sitting in the third row of that class and feeling attracted to another boy for the first time. I mean, and that was 20 years ago, and I still remember that feeling. He was 4 seats over and a little bit back to the left, 1 row behind. And in that moment, the main thing I remember feeling was just sickened, disgust, like a disease in my body, and thinking, oh my God, like what is wrong with me? And the second thought I had was no one can ever know this. I had never met an LGBT person. I'd never seen one that I can remember. The only story I'd ever heard about an LGBT person was that my great uncle had a best friend who turned out to be gay. And when he told him he was gay, he cut ties with him. Eugene's family had previously cut ties with him. And then he died of AIDS in the 80s. And so my thought was, you lose your family, you lose your friends, you die before 30, you can't have a life. So sitting there in Miss Tenney's class, I made a vow to myself that I was never going to let anyone find out about this. And I held on to that for nearly 10 years. And the next thing I remember was George W. Bush running for re-election as president of the United States. And he basically had two things he was about: anti-terror and stop gay marriage. And again, a lot of people now pretend that they were for gay marriage all the time because, you know, that's what happens, right? First they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then they violently oppose you, and then they pretend they were with you all along, which is the trajectory, at least with gay marriage, that happened. But as a 16-year-old at that point, I remember seeing the president of the United States say, not as like a joke, not followed by LOL, the biggest threat to American life was gay people having the right to get married. And over half the country agreeing with him. And over 30 states in the coming years, including Florida, banning gay marriage in their constitution. And so it led me to a strong belief that no kid should look out at the world and think it's not built for them. And seeing Ron DeSantis now really reminds me a lot, more on the nose, but it's the same story that George W. Bush was telling 20 years ago. And in his case, it was to get reelected. And I do think Ron DeSantis has some amount of hate in his heart, whether it's as much as he lets on or that's sort of an act to marshal votes and it's a cynical political tactic, I don't know. But I do think that he's using the community as a punching bag. And that's where we are, is that we have people who believe it's okay for the people in our audience to feel alone because it advances their own political agenda. And to me, I've dedicated my life to fighting back against that. First as a high school teacher, and then after 4 years of that, moved in to political and civic work, was chair of an organization called Engage Miami that gets young people involved in politics, moved into other roles with political campaigns. And it's simple. It's because there are still seventh graders in Miss Tenney's class thinking the world isn't built for them. And what can we do? A couple quick things that come to mind before the rest of the panel adds their knowledge and experience, is that it is crucial to register the votes. I've run campaigns, and they literally will build strategy or not based on how many people are registered to vote. And if you're not registered, you're not considered. So that's the first thing, right? It's not enough, but it's a necessary step. The second thing, and I can't overstate how important this is, the best advice I ever got, and I have always found this to be true about influencing the political process, is that if you show up to a local commission meeting and you have 5 people in matching t-shirts, you'll get the attention of the commissioners. If you have 10 people in matching t-shirts, you'll switch votes. And if you have 15 people in matching t-shirts, they'll poop their pants. Different word, but I'm going to say poop their pants. And I have found that to be so true. If you know, I think we have this sense, and this is the thought I want to end on, that there's like a Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. The truth is, every campaign I've ever seen is a lot smaller than you imagine it to be. There is no Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. There's no all-powerful person with a plan. There's someone who, just like all of us, doesn't know what's going to happen, and they have their vision of society. And you don't need to marshal, the 2 million residents of Miami-Dade County to influence people. You need to get 10 people to show up in a matching shirt, and that you can do.
Excellent, excellent. All right. Thank you for your invaluable insights and your dedication to promoting political participation and civic engagement within the LGBTQ+ community. Your work serves us as an inspiration to us all and reminds us that when we join together and use our collective voices, we can make a real impact on the world around us. To our audience, we hope that you found this segment both informative and empowering. And as we continue to fight for LGBTQ+ rights and social justice, it is essential that each of us take an active role in the democratic process, both by voting and by holding our elected officials accountable for their actions. Thank you to all of my panelists once again for our thought-provoking discussion. And moving forward, I want to recognize the importance of engaging in open dialogue and creating a space for our audience to ask questions and share their perspectives. So remember that we're still taking questions. With that said, I'm excited to announce that we have now reached the Q&A phase of this event, and this is your opportunity to engage with our esteemed panelists directly and seek their expertise on the various topics discussed today. To make the most of this interactive session, please submit your questions using the chat feature or on our platform. Harold will be monitoring the chat and selecting a variety of questions for our panelists to address. And to our in-person crowd, please submit your questions on the card request. We highly encourage you to participate and ask questions, as this is a unique opportunity to engage with experts in LGBTQ+ rights, education, and civic engagement. Your questions not only help to deepen the conversation, but also provide a valuable opportunity to learn from one another and explore diverse perspectives. So, without further ado, let's dive into your questions and continue this engaging and vital conversation. We're looking forward to hearing from you and addressing your thoughts and concerns.
So one of the questions that we got online is, are there some ways that people can maintain a good balance between staying aware, being rightfully frustrated, and taking actions where they can, but also protect their mental health and well-being?
Yeah,
We all look at you.
right. Balance is hard. I know that all of us here are obviously interested in having a voice in these processes, and so I think any of us could attest to how we manage our own mental health. But I know for me, it's always about limiting how much time I'm spending getting news content, because it's just not even just LGBTQ. All of the content can be quite overwhelming at times, and so limiting those things, and taking time to kind of extract yourself from all of it, I think is really important. But then also talking to your community, I think is really, really vital, because there's so much around that is telling us that we're wrong, or that we don't belong, or that whatever we are hearing at all times. Talking to my community helps, because then I'm hearing the positive messages. And I think that's also really, really vital to maintain your balance, is to hear people telling you, no, you are valid, you are right. This is something we're doing together and you're not alone.
Yeah.
And some people look at self-care as like getting away from everything going on and doing things for the individual, but there's also community care that can be really powerful, where you engage with other people in spaces that empower you with information and ways to move forward, and that can be really restorative. And it's also a cycle. Like, balance is a little bit hard to reach. So I like to think of it as riding the waves. When we have legislative sessions, it gets crazy, but we have to make sure that we put time to rest on our calendars. It's a relay race, right? We have to hand the baton. When we're getting too tired, we have to recognize that and hand it out so we don't burn out. And it's a really painful lesson, because I think America preaches individual exceptionalism, right? Like, we as individuals are all supposed to save the world individually, but that's not how it's going to happen. So finding those community members that you can lean on and say, you know what, I need a couple days. Can you handle this for me, or update me in a few days when I get back from being on the beach for a couple days to relax? That's really important.
I think it's also important for us to really take care of our mental health individually. It is our own responsibility, especially if we're adults. It's important not to suppress the feelings that you're having. All feelings are valid. It's important to discuss this with a therapist, preferably not a first-time trans therapist like your experience was. So you can find therapists that can actually understand what you're talking about. And there are therapists out there. I believe in therapy big time. Talk therapy, community therapy. I love the idea of community therapy, because then you're not isolating yourself. And when you're going through mental problems, you isolate. That's the first thing you do. So if you have a support system of like-minded people, or people can understand and respect your experience, that's really important. And I know that Transsocial does a lot of that. The McKenzie Project does a lot of that. Trans Inclusive, there are a lot of organizations that focus on that. So the resources are out there.
Yeah, and there are also many spiritual communities that are very gay affirming, and they're very queer affirming, and they're there to provide that space for community engagement, for community therapy, as Ashley said, which is beautiful. When I was a couple of years ago, before COVID, I was running a group that was a very open and inclusive group, and it had people from all walks of life. And I found that having people sit at a table together, sharing a meal, and just existing together was a great therapeutic moment for everybody to just be at peace for that 10-15 minutes. They were at peace. They were heard, they were seen, they were celebrated. And there are many community places that can do that. And if you can't find one, start one. You have friends, just invite them over to your house. Have a drink, have some cheese, have some food, watch RuPaul, watch the movies.
Yeah.
Just take care of yourselves and take care of your community. And we all have that one friend that is the extrovert. We all know them. Let them lead it. They'll do a great job, and just support them from the sidelines. And that's how you build community. And this community engagement can then lead to political engagement as well. Like Aaron said, if you have 10 of your friends that put on the same T-shirt and you show up at a commission meeting, they will look at you. And what was it, Aaron? 15 or more, and they do what?
Something happens to their pants.
Yeah, I feel like therapy, it is like my queen right here said. Therapy and mental health is very big. Like, in order to go through anything, like, you have to take care of your mental health. And therapy isn't just sitting down, talking to the counselor or anything. It comes in many. I have a pet cat. That is my pet therapy. She's a lot, but it's like 1 a.m. in the morning. You can't call a therapist and say, "Hey, I need to talk." You got to talk to the cat. So it's like that's that. It can also be something you love, like drag. Like, I cheer. That is my getaway. Like, I'm very upset. Okay, now I can go to practice and just go to cheering and flipping and anything else I need to do to get my mind off of certain things.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like in this community, like the whole queer community, we must take care of our mental health.
Yeah. Therapy, besides talking to a professional, can also come in our artistic ways. Us queers are gifted with many abilities. We could put our mind to something and honestly build a house if we want to. So I think it's important to utilize what makes us special and unique. Relating to, in my culture, our queerness is a lot more than our sexuality or our gender expression. Our queerness is our gifts and our talents. So whether you are a shaman, a war chief, a leader, or just whatever role or society you have within your culture, or for your peers, that is your queerness, not necessarily who you lay with or what you like to wear. So definitely a therapy and all the sorts of sense. And as far as being aware and everything, how you take media, I haven't watched the news on TV ever since a certain orange Cheeto was on screen for a while, because I couldn't take the auditory and visual just effects of that thing anymore. So I decided all my news has just been me reading, whether it's a newspaper or on my phone. I can read the news. I cannot hear the news. I cannot watch the news, but I can read the news. So just your sense of media and how you take it in. Also maybe you need your friends to dish you tea time. It's not necessarily the most reliable source, taking it from a third party of your friend, but just be conscious of your sources.
I agree with you. I think we all can agree with that.
Yes. So next question is actually for Juan over here. And someone online has asked, were you treated differently when you started cheering at Barry?
I haven't given it to my coach. Her name is Sherry. When I first got there, I wasn't, the intention was not cheering. But one of my closest friends who I met there, she wanted to cheer. She was like, "Oh, let's try out for cheer." And I'm like, "Girl, do I look like a cheerleader to you?" And so she was like, "Let's do it." But me, I'm very cautious. So I'm like, "What if they make me put on some pants?" And so she was like, "Don't worry." She DM'd the cheer page and was like, "Oh, my friend want to try it, but she don't want to put on no pair of pants, and she's trans." And the coach emailed back like, "I don't care if she want to put on a skirt, put on a skirt. I'm all for supporting who you are." And I tried out. I made the team. My coach made sure that I had this. It was like a spotlight, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" She was like, she treated me no different than the other girls. We were all sisters. She made sure that anybody could misgender me. It was a consequence. On campus, she made sure everything was A1 for me. It was the community and the family I literally had ever in my life. Because growing up, I didn't really have it. So when I got to cheering, those are my sisters, those are my family, and those are people I will always remember. So no, I wasn't treated differently when it came to cheering from their wise. Now outside wise, I was very much like looked at, what, there's a boy cheering, like, oh, why do you gotta go? And this year I became captain of the team. And it was just like, but at that point, it was like everybody knew me. Like, what you say does not offend me. Like, I'm on the sidelines, you're in the bleachers. It doesn't, like, my impact is stronger than ever. So, to all my other girls out there, you can do it.
Yes.
So we have a question from our in-house studio audience. Where do you see ally groups that we could work with to advance our interests? Where are opportunities to work together?
Well, I do know about Trans Social for sure. Pride Line, I'll give it to them. They have a lot of like great support there. Like I go there for hormones and Medicaid medical stuff and everything, and they have a lot of group projects and a lot of associations that reach out to help any queer youth or anything of that sort. But there's a lot in South Florida. You just gotta look around. It's definitely a lot. I do suggest Pride Line and Trans Social for sure. Like Trans Social, they host online or virtual like meetings where you can all meet together like as a sisterhood or as a space for you to just let go and feel safe and just, vibe.
I find in my experience, as far as allies are concerned, I've created a lot of allies outside of the LGBTQ plus community because I think those allies, when they speak, they're really heard. And for me, I found the best thing to do is just be myself. The good, the bad, the ugly, no makeup, first thing in the morning. Thank you. But I'm there for it. And I think people start seeing you as the human that you are. And then you create that connection, and then they're standing up for our rights.
Yes.
So just be you. That's the one thing you can do 100% perfectly is being you. Shut everything else out.
And Aaron, you were about to jump in?
Yeah, 3 organizations that come to mind. One is Engage Miami, which is youth political and civic engagement, and they do tremendous work. They're extremely queer friendly and also work on housing and all issues that are of interest to young people, both in politics, on campuses. Engage Miami is one to look to. Another one in South Florida is SAVE, which, by the way, again, to the same point of if you show up, I know to you, you might be thinking, I'm a high school student or I'm a college student. What interest would SAVE, the sort of leading LGBT organization in South Florida, have in me? Let me flip the script. When you're like 4 now, when you're 34, 40, 50, if a high school or college student shows up, that's like the most exciting thing ever. Because all of us remember what it was like to be that age. And we're like, I wish I was doing that when I was your age. Like, trust me, you have so much. And if you show up with like 3 people, let alone the magical 10 or 15, you would be like the biggest rock star that's ever existed. So don't think, what interest do they have in me? If you want to step up, that's where you get started. Right? SAVE is a great place, as well as Engage Miami. And another where I lead our youth organizing program is Men for Choice, that educates, activates, and mobilizes pro-choice men. We run a fellowship for 18 to 25-year-olds, and that's like literally an explicit step of how you can learn to get guys who are doing nothing on the issue of reproductive freedom and controlling your own body. About a third of our fellowship is LGBT, obviously. I mean, I'm in charge, so it's pretty gay, right? And very, very affirming. But we see the way that choice, LGBT rights, everything else connects, and that's a great way to step up. But those 3 organizations, Trans Social, and there are plenty of others. But my biggest advice is, if you're interested, just show up. I know it's so easy. I spent so many years being like, I don't know. And I waited till I was in my mid-20s to really start showing up to things. And I just wish, that's why I do youth organizing now. I wish I started when I was younger, because you're so much more valuable and valued than you think you are. And they will be thrilled to see you, because you're like the unicorn. You're the young person showing up that they don't know how to access. And then you can do the rest. And you're like so valuable to them.
I think it's also, we've had a lot of success engaging employers that work in fields that require a lot of creativity, and they want to be affirming workplaces for LGBTQ folks, especially trans folks, and we're going to lose a lot of talent, and it's going to affect the business industry down here. And right, we know that our government only cares about money and power, right? So if we can hit them where it hurts in that money, and hold businesses accountable for their political donations, and also make sure that they have non-discrimination policies that protects all of us. Like that can be a really powerful thing that youth can advocate for.
Absolutely.
And also another great place to find allies to work with is find affinity groups or start affinity groups. I know I love Star Trek. I'm a big Trekkie. And I know that a lot of people who like Star Trek also have this pluralist mentality because that's what we're told in Star Trek. I like Star Wars too. I would love to get together with other people who like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, anime. There are so many ways that you can form groups that will bring in a multitude of people that are not just queer people. So that is another way to either join those that exist. I mean, every university has an anime group. Find an anime group if you like anime. Start a Star Trek group. They probably don't have Star Trek groups. That's fine. I accept that. Maybe I'll start one. But just find affinity groups that you can join and talk to other people because they're there for the same interest, and now you share something in common with them, and the conversations get a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that is all awesome information, and hopefully the audience looks those organizations up.
Yes. So we're gonna move on to the next question. I am a university professor, and we are starting to organize about this. Not so much a question, but more of a statement. Thank you. You have?
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
Yeah,
We can't hear you. I'm sorry. But yeah, sorry. We'll move on, but we'll talk privately afterwards.
Okay, sure.
I'm gonna ask another question from our online audience. As a teacher leading a high school GSA, how best do you think I should handle the rightful fears of our students? One was nearly in tears yesterday. It's heartbreaking.
I would invite some elders in to talk. We've gone in and talked to GSAs, and my husband Morgan is a trans man, and he's a little older, so he's got gray hair, and it's been really impactful for the youth to see themselves older, and in the world, engaging in the world, and to have a trans adult tell them, we're here to fight for you as we're fighting for ourselves, and it's going to be okay. So inviting some of these community groups and some of these leaders into the GSA to talk to the youth and let them see themselves reflected.
As much as I feel empowered being with a bunch of peers my age who are all like brown, black, and queer, and I feel invincible, and all that. What impacts me long term is my elders, whether they be my family or just my friends who have impacted me. Meeting the people who I've come from and meeting the people and sharing relationships with the people who have fought for me to have a better life on this earth makes me feel so much better. To know that I come from such great, beautiful people is what gives me the motivation to not only fight for myself, but also fight for my communities and my youth. To know that I myself can impact my own youth to feel more confident in their skin, whether they be girls or boys, because of my queerness, honestly, is such a privilege. But yeah, no, just my elders, my gay elders have just made my entire whole world.
I want to jump to Aaron.
Yeah, 2 concrete steps. If you're in South Florida, reach out to Safe Schools South Florida. I mean, the reason I'm here and skipping this other thing I should be doing is that Safe Schools South Florida was an absolute lifeline to my students. And I reached out to the executive director whenever I ran into problems or something, if something was getting sticky. And in this time, they have the know-how, they have a lot of things, right? So I'd say reach out to Safe Schools South Florida. And second, it goes off of the last 2 series of comments. But bring speakers. In the 3 years that I was sponsoring, we brought 16 LGBT adult speakers who are diverse in the broadest sense of the term, different career paths, different ages, different backgrounds. And one of the best pieces of advice I got that I acted on, and it was incredible, is that everyone wants to speak in a high school, and most people, if they get asked to speak in a high school, are really honored and flattered, and most people just don't think to make the ask. We had 16 openly LGBT adult speakers. Not one of that was 16 yes for yes. Right? No one said no. The last speaker we ever brought was federal judge Darren Gales, who is the first openly gay black federal judge in American history, who's here from South Florida, and he was honored to come speak to the high school students. And we were able to have this federal judge, black man, come in his judge's robe and talk about what it was like in the isolation he felt and so on. And again, this was 2012 to 2016. So, maybe if you ask 16 people, you get 12 yeses now because there's fear and all that. Or maybe you get people who are even more motivated. But those speakers were tremendous and way more interesting than me, and gave that sense of possibility, and especially now kind of show that there's hope.
Thank you, Aaron. We have a next question from our audience. What is the impact of schools not complying? As an alumni, it is a matter of carrot and a stick. I donate if they protect students' rights. Do you advocate boycotts, like businesses who are anti-LGBT?
Yes.
We're all looking at you.
Money and power is the only way anybody
Yeah.
listens, and the best way to limit money and power is to not support them and not enter those businesses and not provide donations to those organizations. And so yes.
Yeah. And social media has become a tool and also a very destructive force in our nation. But at the same time, a lot of these businesses are on social media. So all you need to do is just get on there and just write a review. Write your opinions about it. Tag the business. Let the business know what they're doing and how what they're doing is affecting you as well. And that's a very easy way to do it. That is nonviolent resistance. That is something that we can utilize the tools that we have been given by Silicon Valley, and just try to reclaim those tools for good and not allow them to continue to isolate us and put us into these camps of us versus them. Because there are more of us in the center in this us versus them campaign.
Yeah, I think they hold the microphones, right? Like they're really controlling the narrative, and they're inundating our airwaves with all of this negative messaging. And I think it is important to see how much we can claim back. There really are a lot more people on our side than against it. They're just a lot louder right now, and it feels the other way around. But I was just really shocked by like the TikTok fundraiser that happened yesterday with raising money for Point of Pride. They raised like over $2 million for folks to access surgery. So like there is a lot of support for the community, and we just have to keep our focus on that.
Yeah. So next question. We're going to ask an online question, and this comes from Luigi Ferrer, who works for Florida Department of Health. Can someone address the rights of students on Florida schools to receive accurate, up-to-date sexual health education in their jurisdiction? We are the highest rates of new HIV infections in the country, right here in South Florida, and particularly in youth.
When I was in high school, we actually got like sexual education, and my teacher, she didn't go by the book. Like she went like full blown, like this is real, this is what's gonna happen. But like now I have not heard of sex ed being taught like at all. And I just think like it should be. Like it helped me. I'm pretty sure it helped a lot of people, but like now it just feel like it's nothing that should be taught because they feel like it's not age appropriate. And I feel like everything can be taught within the age range. Like I can talk about something and keep it age appropriate to the certain audience, and I feel like that's something that like we wouldn't have this issue if we taught more sex ed classes. No, I'm not saying you have to go and just go and have sex. That's not what the class is for. This is to inform you, to help you. It's just like a advanced birds and the bees. Because if your parents don't talk about it, how would you learn? How would you know to protect yourself? How would you know that you shouldn't be doing this or you shouldn't be doing that? I just feel like it should be taught, but it hasn't been taught a lot.
This actually just came up for vote with the school board, and abstinence was what they were trying to push. And thank God there were a lot of activists in the audience that were speaking, and now they have to readdress that because that's not a realistic solution, especially in South Florida, where HIV/AIDS is on the rise, especially among our youth, 20 to 29. So people have to become educated in our high schools. So it's really important that education saves lives.
I was a TA for a bio lab in undergrad, and we did a lab where we went through contraceptives and how they work and had the students kind of invent their own new contraceptive, and so many of them had no idea what we were talking about at all. They didn't know that you could get STIs from oral sex. They didn't know that you could get it not just get an STI from oral sex, but in different parts of your body. Now I'm helping people in clinics with their eyes, and there are manifestations of herpes in your eyes, and people don't understand how that happens. And there are just so many ways in which there's just no knowledge about these things. And even if there was education in high school and before in middle school and such, it's not taken seriously, it's not really listened to, and it's all this surface level stuff that they just don't actually end up, it's scary images, so people turn it off and they don't listen. That tactic just doesn't work. As much as we know that abstinence only education doesn't work, fear doesn't work either. These things, they just make people turn off and start ignoring. So I think this education is really, really vital, because it's not just about, let's make sure we don't get pregnant. Okay, I'm not having sex that can get me pregnant, so I'm fine. But that's not the only problem here.
And just also like taking away all the stigmas and all the misinformation that happens. It's just like Aaron, when I first started to realize that I'm queer and I like guys, I thought that meant that I was automatically gonna get HIV. And not just HIV, but I went in my mind, I was like full-blown AIDS, like that's it, it's over. The moment that I have sex, that this is gonna happen and this will be, like this will end me. And I cannot tell you how many years I spent being so afraid of sex. It was just, it was, debilitating in many ways, because I couldn't live into the fullness of my queerness because I was afraid of it. And it wasn't until I met other queer men and I was surrounded by especially by older queer men, that I realized that a lot of what I felt was a fear tactic that was in place in me by my community, my Hispanic community, and it wasn't real. And and then thankfully I had this experience at a local church, and I was able to come into myself, and I was able to be more authentically me in my early 20s. But how many people are just denying themselves because of like false information, or actually putting themselves at risk because of bad information? It's we have to find a better way to talk about these things.
Absolutely.
Our state government is just incredibly hypocritical in that they feel like teachers should have like a master's degree, right, to teach different subjects, but that parents should be responsible for teaching something so fundamental to like human expression. And so it's like, where's that line of expertise? And I grew up in a town that had the highest teen pregnancy rate. That was, and our sex ed was like a cartoon movie. That was it. And then moving into a more metropolitan area and being exposed to so many things, I was really behind in my knowledge of safety and consent and all those important negotiations that happen. So it's such a critical thing to be taught in our schools. And I also think that our government is in denial about age appropriateness and at what age children are actually starting to engage in different sexual behaviors. It's a lot younger than you think. And we have to stop putting our head in the sand and actually have destigmatizing conversations about this where they're empowered with real information.
Absolutely.
So we move on to another question. This is also from our audience online. South Florida has a huge Caribbean community. What connections or partnerships can be made to improve the quality of life of the LGBTQ community in the Caribbean?
That I feel like it's maybe a challenge, because I know a lot of Caribbeans, they don't really support queerness because of how they're raised, but you do have those that do support it. So it's like, if we could get like those people within that Caribbean community to like stand up and be like, hey, like, this is like, we just need to accept this. Like, it's always about like, sometimes it's like, I just want respect. Like, I understand you will not accept me, but just respect me. And if you showed that respect, I feel like everybody would show the respect, and it wouldn't be so much of an issue as, oh, I hate this. This is against the culture. This is not what we stand for. But I feel like if we have more advocates within the Caribbean culture would definitely support us more.
So, I want to piggyback off of your point. I think someone earlier said each one teach one, and while there are a lot of issues that are currently occurring in Florida, there have been many advancements within the United States itself. especially in comparing them to the countries within the West Indies. And I think just lending a helping hand, reaching out and making the connections to the groups that are within those communities, teaching them whether it's advocacy, civic engagement, and how to bring further awareness to the general population about the existence of queer lives. I think that would actually be a great system.
Speaking very rash and very bold, I know my POV on this is a little pointed, but I feel in my hearts of hearts that gay men in America who are over 18 not living with their family have a privilege that exists here in this country that doesn't exist around the world. And I feel like it's up to us as queer people in America to support our family outside of America who aren't as privileged to be so expressionable or just so free out in public. It shocked me when I learned that Italian gay boys were being beat up in the streets just for going out and having dates. The photos, images shocked me. And personally, I know that my freedom in this country comes from trans women who gave their lives for me to be able to be so outward. So I feel a due diligence to be so bold and so self-loving because I know that my self-love and me being my authentic self is in support to those who can't be so free and true to themselves. So that's my pointed POV.
It's interesting that this came up. I'm a member of the Dolphin Democrats, and we had a meeting, and there were different people in different sessions that gave questions, and that was the exact same question that came up. So I think it's on our community to create programs that are inclusive. It's really important. And again, I go back to the HIV/AIDS issue. It's projected that by the year, I think 2030, 1 in 2 Black men in South Florida will be HIV positive. Let that sink in for a moment. That's a lot. So we need to make sure we embrace everybody and make sure we create programs that are inviting to everybody so everybody feels included. And that's also why it's important to teach sex education in schools, how to protect yourself, because this epidemic is blowing up again here in our own backyard.
Go ahead.
Oh, just my only point. I just want to say, also highlighted for me, one of my highlights in sex education was about rape culture and the fact that, you know, when you're out partying as an adult and you're inebriated, to not. So I feel like also another important part of sex education is the openness to what you can learn of what and when, how to be with somebody, what is consent, and learning what consent is, because consent is very important for everybody, no matter what your background.
I have a little bit of, I forgot what I was going to say, but I want to say that the current lifetime risk for a Black trans woman in Miami is 1 in 2. So we're already there in the Black trans community, and it's overlooked a lot because it's lumped in with the MSM category within the health department. So we've been trying to do a lot of advocacy around that, but it's not there yet. But we also have to think about language justice, especially in South Florida. A lot of materials aren't translated well into Spanish or Creole or some of the common languages down here. And there's also like that cultural angle that we can't create cookie cutter resources for the community. We really have to be culturally competent if we're going to reach out to different communities and include them in a meaningful way.
It's interesting you brought up the HIV in the trans community. I'm also part of the Broward HIV Planning Council, and we've had this discussion. So I've been on that committee, System of Care Committee, for a year now. And I was looking at all the different numbers. And for South Florida, for Broward, the number I think was 54 HIV positive trans women. And I'm like, that can't be right. And then we have a lot of things with our gender identity and how do we reach these groups? You know, how do we reach these groups to make sure they're getting the care that they need? It goes back to the schooling as well. And what you said was really great. What is consent? You know, what is healthy?
And I think that so many of our resources are stuck in the center of a city when the biggest need is outside of Miami, outside of downtown Fort Lauderdale. And this is where really virtual options and just for us to be creating platforms that give ease of access to information in multiple language is so important. And speaking from Safe Schools South Florida, that is something that we are actively working on. We will actively try to do and partner, like really create partnerships that we can have these resources more easily available and in the language of their choice, and specifically for parents. I mean, I can tell you, I had such a hard time finding resources in Spanish for my parents when I was coming out. It was all in English, and they don't read English. They just don't. I mean, my dad does, but my dad wouldn't read it. But my mom, she would read it. My grandma would read it, and there's just nothing out there for them.
Yeah.
So we're gonna move on to another question, and this one comes from our audience here. Like the Miranda rights are there to exist to protect us. Is there anything that we can use? Are there any laws that we can use to protect us from having to give our private information out to the universities, or if requested, is there anything that exists for that?
My favorite is the Fifth Amendment.
I think specifically, and we sort of addressed it earlier, and I think it was Francesca, the government requested some health information from a lot of the state universities, but it was specifically meant to be supposed to be anonymized. And so they did it in a way to get past the laws in that instance. And I'm not a legal professional, so when it comes to diving deep and finding, specific laws or avoiding loopholes,
Right.
I think that that's probably something that a lot of the different organizations within the community can maybe think about more as we're looking at a multi-pronged approach on how to tackle this issue.
And part of the transgender student, from my experience, I was transitioning while I was completing my education. So of course I had to make that information known to the university so that everything got changed and reflected. So that becomes a slippery slope as well.
And I love the ideas that the youth have around like messing up the systems. So what if 80% of the student body requested information on HRT? Then the data they have is useless, right? So how can we muddy the systems that they set up to collect this information about us that they really shouldn't? Like, it should be protected, but how do we ensure that if they do get a hold of it, it's unusable? I like that method.
They call it malicious compliance.
Yes.
And just working together, and I keep saying this, but this is actually like in Martin Luther King Jr.'s book, Where Do We Go From Here? One of the main things that he said is that we need to be creative gadflies and just buzz around them, just constantly resisting, constantly finding new ways to resist what is being asked of us. And as leaders of nonprofits and students, we have the calling to find creative ways to resist, to find ways that we can come together as a community and say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to give you our information, and what can we do? What legal route do we have to protect ourselves? And we need to find queer affirming lawyers, like just get more people on these conversations, because that's the only way that we're going to survive this.
Absolutely.
And we have some other questions here. What is the best way to get our political leaders to care more about these issues and to be allies in the movement? And I would love to hear more from Aaron about this, since you have a lot of words about this, Aaron.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is there needs to be representation in office. So I serve on the campaign board of the Victory Fund, which is the largest organization in the country that exclusively focuses on electing LGBT people to public office. And right now, we have State Senator Chevron Jones. And even though, Chev on his own, Senator Jones on his own is not enough, it is unbelievably powerful to see him go up there and give testimony while they're attacking and dehumanizing us, for Senator Jones to be able to say, say, this is what I remember when I was a kid. This is what you're doing to the people that I represent. This is what you're doing to people like me. If it wasn't working, they wouldn't feel so threatened by it, right? There was an openly gay Hispanic state rep in Central Florida named Carlos Guillermo Smith, who they spent something like $5 million going after him because he was such a threat to have him be able to speak and be in the state legislature. And there are a few others, Michelle Rayner, in St. Petersburg. And so it's important to have those people. And if you want to get involved in those sorts of races, again, come volunteer. There's a lot fewer people involved than you think. That's a great way. And if you're not, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? So you need to have those people in there. The second thing, and I cannot stress this strongly enough, is that if we feel together rather than alone, we have much more power than we think. People who are disconnected do not have political power. People who are together do. I learned a great lesson from a professor of mine, a mentor of mine, who was heavily involved in the civil rights movement. And he used to say, in the civil rights movement, the realization, if you look at a place like Birmingham, Alabama, was that people could turn their feet and their time and their $1.25 bus fare pooled together into power. That enough people choosing not to use that in service of getting on the public bus and boycotting that public bus after a year turned people who were individualized into collective power. And that realization can be applied in so many ways. And I'm convinced that a big part of what they're trying to do is make you feel like you're whatever, feet, voice, $1.25, whatever individual things you have cannot be pooled with other people, and it's not worth trying to get involved in the process. It really is. And like I said, 10 or 15 people is more than enough. You showing up is a starting point. And the last and final thing is to use your voice in whatever ways is safe and possible, because what they are doing is they're lying about this, right? They put it in a way that sounds very reasonable, and they say, drag queens are sexualizing children. They are not, right? That is not what that's about. But then, people don't know a drag queen. It kind of sounds reasonable-ish, and then that sort of story fills the void, right? Fills the lack of knowledge that person has with something that's a lie, which can be punctured by a person speaking the truth, right? For all of the crazy things about trans people, if someone were actually to listen to Vaughn for more than 5 minutes, it becomes immediately clear that those sorts of lies aren't true. And this is just who people are. So I would say, make sure that we do have people in public office who can speak for the community to get involved if that feels important to you. And the final thing is to use your voice in whatever way you can, which is another sort of on-ramp to get involved. And with that, I'm so sorry, but I actually was supposed to leave at 1, and I'm going to get in a lot in trouble, but the panel was so good and everyone was so good, and you all, this is so important that I stayed. But the time has come for me to sashay away, and I'm so sorry to be leaving early, but I'm probably going to get docked like an hour and a half of time. It's like being a student again. I'm skipping class, but I'm so glad to be here. Thank you all for fellow panelists, and if I can be useful, I don't know if you're allowed to get my contact information or whatever, but if I can be useful, I will, because they're coming after you, not because you're weak, but because you're strong. Good to see you all.
Thank you, Aaron.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us in this important discussion during the Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable. We invite you to stay connected with us through social media by searching at Safe Schools 1991 and our website, safeschoolsouthflorida.org, for updates on future events and ways you can get involved in promoting LGBTQ+ rights and inclusion. But before we close our program for today, please allow me to show this last final video, which serves as a special invitation for all of you watching us today or through the week to join Safe Schools at Miami Beach Pride on Sunday, April 16, starting at 12 noon on Ocean Drive. Let's take a look. We would like to thank Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network for the amazing dedication and support that they give Safe Schools and our community commitment to LGBTQ+ students and youth. On behalf of Safe Schools, I'd like to extend our deepest gratitude to all of our esteemed panelists and to you, our audience, for your continued support and engagement. We look forward to continuing this vital dialogue and working together to create a more inclusive, accepting, and just society. Thank you and have a great day.